Thank you, Minister. Member for Cochin Valley.
Thank you, thank you, Honourable Speaker. I found it very interesting indeed to listen to the Minister of Health on a couple of particular interesting points that I was planning on making anyway. and so it's great to know that there's actually some thought from the other side of the aisle about things that are critical to encourage fiscal solutions for the issue of health care. And one of them is to try to keep people out of health care, and that's an important point. In the Cowichan Valley, I recently had a man named David who came into my office who is living on disability pension of $906 a month, Honourable Speaker. I would really like the folks on the other side of the aisle to think about that, to think about living on a disability pension of $906 a month. Okay? This guy was a shipwright. He knows what it's like to carry on wonderful employment, but through no fault of his own, ended up injured, ended up with a back that was completely disabled, only 10% of the use of his hands, Honourable Speaker. And he told me just before Christmas that he has to make the choice every month. In the freezing cold weather, he has to make the choice of whether he's going to eat or whether he's going to have heat, Honourable Speaker. He pays his pad rent for his old trailer. He's left with about $500 a month, which is more than most. And he made that point, Honourable Speaker, that, hey, he's not the worst of the worst. He wanted to speak up for other folks living on a disability pension. And he wanted us as MLAs to hear from somebody that's in his situation. He wanted us to hear what it's like to go down and ask for emergency funding because he was out of oil in his furnace. And do you know that in the province of British Columbia, if you don't have $300 to fill up your tank, you aren't getting any service, Honourable Speaker. There isn't going to be any oil delivered. And I tried, like I got on the phone, and we ended up raising money, taking a tin cup basically around to friends and saying, we got to do something about this guy, because his impassioned story really struck my heart. To hear this guy tell me what it was like, he actually said to me, why is it that I have to get so sick, sitting in a freezing cold, deciding whether to eat potatoes or rice? He says, I go to the food bank. He said, do you know how hard that is for a guy that's worked all his life to go to the food bank and get basically 3 days worth of food, Honourable Speaker? And he says, do I have to get so sick that I end up in the hospital? And he said, you know, I can figure a few things out. And I've got it figured out that me ending up in the hospital isn't a very good idea. That's not a good expenditure of the good people of British Columbia's money. Wouldn't it be better for them to come up with some kind of program to help keep me out of the hospital? And that was the brilliant point that the minister stuck on that I'm delighted to hear him thinking about. It really is good. Because the fact that somebody's thinking about it, that, hey, we've got to find ways to help keep people out of the hospital is a good thing. But it was really something to hear him tell the tale of what it was like to really feel in such despair in the cold. Like he had that cold weather and he had run out of oil because of other financial pressures. He says he doesn't sit around and watch TV, by the way, Honourable Speaker. He can't even afford the cable bill, so there's no TV. And he sits there in the cold and then takes himself for a walk, and he told me he walked down close to the bridge and took a long, hard look over. And I said, I don't even want to hear that, like, this is scary, that, like, please. And he said, but you do start to wonder whether anybody cares about all us folks living on disability. And I said, absolutely, there are people that care. And I agree with you that $906 a month isn't something that people can live on. And I know, like I get it, that we've got all kinds of financial pressures, Honorable Speaker, on the good people of British Columbia, all kinds of terrible financial pressures. And maybe we should say that we should leave it up to the church or people of goodwill to look after these folks. But where are they? Are they taking care of them? No. There's so many of them. I see them down at the food bank. I see the lineups. I see the situation right here in British Columbia. Meanwhile, the richest corporations in the world, this government is proud of it. I've heard them stand up here and say, we're proud of it. We've reduced corporate taxes from 16% down to 10%. Oh, they took a little back, Honorable Speaker. They took a little bit back. But they're proud of it, of the situation where we've got people living in desperate situations in community after community after community. And a lot of them are getting to be older people. And I just want you to hear some of the health facts that I'm dealing with. We've got the largest First Nations band in British Columbia with the highest unemployment. Youth unemployment is 80%. And meanwhile, there are temporary foreign workers brought in to work at the Burger King. What? Like, that shouldn't be allowed to happen. I don't know who's responsible for that, but they should be fired. Because the co-op right there outside the reserve, they have the good sense to say, we're right here, we're going to hire First Nations, and they have. But shame on those people that would think of bringing in temporary foreign workers to do that kind of work when we've got people unemployed, youth unemployed, without hope, desperate, and no plan, no mentorship plan, no helpful strategy to sit down and really work out a jobs plan. And you know, your jobs plan is laughable. I went down to the jobs plan folks there in Duncan. And I sat down and I said, okay, if I want to be a truck driver, let's look into that. You know how many truck drivers you got on Vancouver Island? How many positions? Well, yeah, you go on the computer yourself. I found one, and you got to have like 25 years experience. And if I had a tradesman, he had 3 tickets, come into my office and say, I've followed all of that jiggery-pokery on the computer program and tried to find my way. He says, I'm a welder, millwright, I've got all kinds of training, and he says, I can't get a job through that stupid system. And my assistant had the good sense to say, get in your truck and drive up there, you'll find a job in no time at all, which is what he did and which is what happened. But try to follow that silly program. I'd like to meet the man or woman who's actually had wonderful success with a jobs center and being able to connect jobs. And locally, they tell me that they could actually help people connect them to jobs and job training. Like I had a lady that she built up the courage because she was retiring. She was retiring from her job, one of these contracted out jobs program folks. And she said, actually had an inspiring and honest moment that she said, you know, we could connect people to real jobs. And she said, I'm thinking right now of a young mom with little kids at home. And she's working in a restaurant, making almost nothing, minimum wage kind of job. And they could get her into a health care kind of job if they could give her the training. And did you know that our good province, in the budget of the province of British Columbia, we're sending money back. The feds put some money in, the province put some money in, But these guys haven't figured out a way to connect the dots, and instead we end up with those young moms being told, oh, here's the system. If you're unemployed, you got to go out every day and look for a job. And you want to take a training program? Oh, sorry, that doesn't tick the box. If you tick that box, you're out. And that's what the employment people tell me. They say, if only we could take people and actually train them and still give them some funding while they're taking the training, wouldn't that be great? But apparently you can't do that here in British Columbia. Way too complicated to figure that one out. It's just way too complicated. I don't know why, but I'd sure like to talk to that fellow too that's responsible for that plan. I want you to know that in the Cowichan Valley, we've got roughly 80,000 people, and that's outside of the boundaries of the Cowichan Valley for the purposes of MLA. I'm talking about the regional district. We've got 8,000 people, or 10%, that are aged 65 or older. More than 6,000 of them are over age 75. And since 2001, the population in the Cowichan Valley aged 75 to 84 has increased by 15%. So there's an area where we really need healthcare help. The population aged 85 and over has increased by a total of 43%. In the Cowichan Valley, the aging population is increasing at a much faster rate than either the overall Viha region or the province as a whole, Honorable Speaker. The Cowichan Valley has the province's highest per capita ratio of people with diagnosed physical, mental, social, special needs challenges. Okay, those are the facts. The Cowichan Valley has established track record of being a community-minded, creative, and tenacious problem-solving social, mental, and physical health challenges. They come up with innovative ideas right there in the Cowichan Valley, and they do. And the minister is right about another thing. We've got some fantastic people within the healthcare system that do outstanding work for the province of British Columbia, and I join in commending those folks for the outstanding work that they give. However, in the Cowichan Valley right now, there's a high need for additional residential beds for frail seniors, and that's after they closed the Cowichan Lodge, which was a disaster, and of course we've got the Ombudsman report on what a disaster that was, and that was political shenanigans. If you've ever seen jiggery pokery, there it is, trying to shut down a publicly owned facility, providing some of the best care you could find in British Columbia, rose gardens, all these wonderful things, and they shut it all down so they could contract it out and give it to a for-profit facility. And at the end, we've got all of the publicly funded residential care facilities in the Cowichan Valley are full, and they have been for more than 8 years now. There is a high need for additional transitional care beds. We've got people sitting in hospital often that should be in a transitional care bed. We've got a high need for dementia and gentle care programs, for respite care beds and services, a high need for caregiver support services and programs, and high need for hospice and palliative care beds, for all-day adult care programs, for incontinence management clinic. We need an effective chronic care management plan, falls prevention plan, speech language pathology. A lot of things like that are necessary, Honorable Speaker, with whether it's heart attacks or whatever. There's always a need for some of these programs, and it's becoming tougher and tougher. And there is a high need for better, faster, and more locally available services for people who are on the autism spectrum disorder. And as I'm sure I've said before, I have a grandson, Gabriel, who is a wonderful young man now, 14, and he's got autism, but very special indeed. I am appreciative of the help that he did get, but that funding has been dramatically reduced, and what's been available has changed dramatically, certainly in schools, the ability to get the help he needs. I want to turn now to more about the budget choices, that budgets really are about making choices. The real question in this process is can you balance a budget for a family or government by selling off some of your assets or by robbing Peter to pay Paul? And the answer is, of course you can. However, this government is not fooling anyone that they are doing what they are doing is not transparent, nor is it sustainable, and we all know it, Honorable Speaker. Let's just look at some of the choices this government has made in transferring or delaying government costs and revenues by deferring BC debts and contractual payments, such as they have done with BC Hydro or the IPP independent power projects. The government has cleverly deferred payment by using long-term contractual payments, some for 30, 40, or even 60 years. Commitments British Columbian taxpayers must pay for through annual contractual payment requirements, but often the details are unknown. We're not entitled to the details because of confidentiality, I'm sure is the answer, but often it's the people of British Columbia that are stuck with the bill. Here are some of the other ways that they deal with taxes in a different way. For example, by raising fees and payments so that taxpayers can be presented the illusion of a balanced budget. For example, the MSP premiums. Jordan Bateman, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, noted that MSP premiums have risen steadily in recent years. It's invisible tax that nobody ever talks about. You know, one of the members was chirping about AAA, the credit rating, and so I thought now is a good time to mention that. Did you know, member, that just before the total collapse of the American financial system, Standard & Poor's and two other major credit rating firms had ruled that these firms were AAA, that had these credit default swaps, and ultimately all of it collapsed, sending the entire system into absolute decay. And so if anybody thinks that just having a AAA credit rating actually means anything anymore, when it was proven by these three rating agencies claiming that it's some wonderful thing, AAA, and they're capitalists, so they hang on to the faint hope that some rating agency comes wandering in and tells you you've got AAA. To you go and give yourself a hug and stand in the mirror giving yourself a hug about your AAA credit rating. My point is that it could collapse. Nothing is necessarily for sure and forever, because some of the same companies that are used today collapsed the entire financial system in North America that we're still not completely recovered from. MSP premiums have risen steadily and are going up again as of January the 15th. They have effectively doubled since 2000, and increase larger than inflation or increases in healthcare spending. BC continues to collect as much revenue from MSP premiums as from corporate income taxes. Wow, that's stunning, Honorable Speaker. The taxes outlined in the government's budget tables don't include other significant costs that depend on the government's policy, including fees from BC Hydro, ICBC, and the ferries. The province's revenue from MSP premiums is budgeted to increase in each year of the next 3 years. Revenue from BC Hydro, which is planning a rate hike, is to go up by 6.7% next year, 12%, and then 7.5%. Regarding the BC ferry mismanagement, in January 13 of this year, the Tourism Industry Association of BC pointed out that tourism generates $13 billion a year in revenue in British Columbia and contributes $1.13 billion in taxes. The tourism industry also pointed out that the government will lose far more in tax revenue than it will save in these ferry cuts. These BC ferry cuts are being made despite the fact that the president of BC Ferries and two of the senior vice presidents of BC Ferries paid themselves, wait for it, $1.547 million last year for standing by and watching as they were raising ferry fares and watching the user rates drop dramatically. So you paid them more to get less service for all British Columbians and to watch the BC ferries launch into further decline. This government has no plan to deal with a bloated management structure at BC Ferries that consumes a jaw-dropping $64 million in compensation annually. Amazingly, no economic impact study was ever undertaken before these latest service cuts were announced. Neither was any consultation made with regional tourism boards or businesses in regards to the huge financial impact on local and overseas markets to these businesses, small and otherwise. As a result, British Columbia's reputation and reliability as a global tourism destination has taken a heavy hit. The tourism operator states it will be very difficult to regain the confidence of our European agencies and clientele in regards to BC's West Coast product offerings moving forward. You know, Honourable Speaker, despite this government's debt-free BC rhetoric, this government has planned to raise the BC debt burden by $7.1 billion. $7.1 billion over the next 3 years alone to reach an unprecedented and record BC debt of $68.9 billion by the end of 2016-17. Yet this Premier has said during the 2013 election, BC would be debt-free under her leadership within 15 years. She implied that it will all be paid by the LNG windfall profits by 2028. Honourable Speaker, this is completely unrealistic to say we'll have debt-free BC in 2028. And I would suggest that this is the biggest liberal jiggery-pokery claim of our time, Honourable Speaker. The biggest claim of our time. More smoke and mirrors. You know, since the Premier started in 2011 and began her so-called debt-free campaign, total provincial debt has taken off like a rocket. From $45.2 billion, it will be rising to the $68.9 billion. In other words, Honourable Speaker, while the Premier campaigned for a debt-free BC, she alone will have booked over half of the debt accumulated since we started calling the province British Columbia. And she will do it all before the next election, and that's not even counting the $100 billion or so in the additional contractual obligations that they have racked up for taxpayers, much of it hidden from public view through these contractual structured deals. The price of this balanced budget is the missed opportunity to address some of the pressing economic and social challenges that this province faces. There is no help for BC students who can't afford rising tuition fees to get the skills training that they need or to get the chance to train for jobs of the future of British Columbia. And again, I mentioned that locally, but it's a fact that there is no mentorship program, and it could be better spent, the money that is being spent on a jobs program, if there was more mentorship, if there was more basically taking the workers by the hand. And I have some experience in doing that, Honourable Speaker. During the time that we had Fletcher Challenge announced 450 jobs lost in the Cowichan Valley, we sat down and worked through with the company and negotiated a job freeze in all of the other mills that were going to be doing some hiring. And some of them, I might add, some of the pulp mills, for example, didn't want to hire laid off loggers or sawmill workers, but to their credit, the company said, no, we're going to give the opportunity to these workers first. And through that mentorship and through real action and the workers and the company sitting down and saying, okay, here are the opportunities. How do we connect those workers with those jobs? And I still run into folks that are at Crofton Pulp Mill that have that were laid off from the forest industry, from logging or sawmilling, that are still there at the Crofton Mill. So I know that it can work, but unless you have real leadership and a mentorship type program and basically a program that connects workers with real leadership from somebody to actually advocate for those workers. And we've got literally thousands of BC workers that are underemployed or unemployed that could be engaged in training programs. Some of those training programs could be quite short and actually get people working here in BC. Instead, I see them take the shortcut route of bringing in temporary foreign workers. There is no help for BC students who can't afford rising tuition fees to get skills training that they need or to get a chance to train for the jobs of the future. And that's something that I was proud of the NDP platform. We were going to put real money in that. And yes, it meant taxing the richest among us, the big corporations. And guess what the big corporations all say, Honorable Speaker? They all say, when you sit down and meet with them, they'll say the biggest problem we've got in British Columbia is skills training. We don't have enough people trained and qualified here in BC to fill the jobs. So they're actually willing to pay a little bit more. I heard them with their own mouths say, we're willing to pay a little bit more if we can get our permits through, whether it's mining permits or permits for the forest industry, if we could pay to get a little bit more. And again, there's where the government has fallen down on the job, could have looked for opportunities to raise fees and other costs to actually generate some income for the province while providing the services that these people desperately need. And particularly when it comes to connecting BC workers with the skills opportunities of the future, this government doesn't get a AAA. You get a big fat F for fail when it comes to retraining forest workers. And for evidence of that, Honorable Speaker, all you have to do is look at the fact that there are now 70,000 temporary foreign workers living in British Columbia, Honorable Speaker. 70,000 temporary foreign workers. That's a record that this government should definitely hang their heads in shame, knowing that things have got so bad that that's the situation here in British Columbia. There was a Simon Fraser University that writes frequently for the Fraser Institute, and he told the Vancouver Sun recently that the temporary foreign worker program only helps the employer at the expense of proper business practices and at the cost of Canadian workers. Grubel, who is this professor, describes the temporary foreign worker program to the Vancouver Sun as a business subsidy that lets frequent users avoid increasing wages to attract workers investing in training, or investing in training and changes to productivity. Canadians and British Columbians should not swallow this argument made by employers who would rather hire immigrants than pay higher wages. A significant factor is the restrictive nature of the work permit and the temporary foreign worker program. They're often tied to just one job, which is one of the problems, to one employer, and to one location. So if the employer wants to mistreat them, they can and get away with it, Honorable Speaker. It's totally unacceptable. I want to talk for a moment here in my waning minutes here about the LNG program and how it's not going to materialize the kind of...
Thank you, member. Your time is up.
Well, we'll save it for another time. More.